I haven't slept properly in 8 months. Every time I close my eyes, I hear it. That voice. Not human, but trying so desperately to be. The static of the radio cutting in and out. The sounds in the background that shouldn't have been there. I've played that recording in my head thousands of times, trying to make sense of what happened that night. Trying to convince myself there's a rational explanation. But there isn't. There never was. My name is Marcus Webb. I used to work night security at Cascade Timber Mill in northwestern Oregon, about 40 miles outside of Eugene. It's not there anymore. The company shut it down 6 months ago, citing operational challenges and unforeseen complications. That's corporate speak for something happened that we can't explain, and we're not willing to risk it happening again. I know because I was there. I heard what came through that radio, and I can't unhear it. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to do something for me. If you want to hear this story, if you want to understand why I can't work nights anymore, why I moved 3 states away and still jump at every unexpected sound, hit the like button and subscribe. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm looking for witnesses. I need people to know this happened. So please, subscribe, and let me tell you about the last night shift I ever worked. Cascade Timber was a medium-sized operation. They processed logs from the surrounding forests, cut them into lumber, shipped them out to construction companies up and down the coast. During the day, the place was loud and busy. Saws screaming, forklifts moving, workers shouting over the noise. But at night it was different. The mill ran a skeleton crew for maintenance and security, usually just 2 people. A maintenance tech who kept the equipment running and did minor repairs, and a security guard who monitored the property, checked the gates, made sure nothing was stolen or vandalized. I'd been working that shift for 2 years. It was boring mostly. I'd make my rounds every hour, checking the perimeter fence, the equipment sheds, the log yards. The rest of the time, I sat in the security office, a small prefab building near the main gate, watching cameras and listening to talk radio. The pay was decent and the solitude didn't bother me. I'm not much of a people person. The quiet suited me fine. The mill was surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides. Old-growth timber that hadn't been touched in decades because it was part of a protected watershed. The property itself covered about 30 acres, but the trees made it feel more isolated than it was. At night, especially during winter when the fog rolled in thick, you couldn't see more than 50 feet in any direction. The floodlights created these pools of harsh white light, but everything beyond their reach was absolute darkness. There had always been stories. Workers would talk about hearing things in the woods at night. Sounds that didn't match any animal they knew. The occasional glimpse of something large moving between trees. Once, a forklift operator found massive footprints near the log pile, easily twice the size of a human foot. Management dismissed it as a bear, even though the tracks were clearly bipedal. People joked about it, made Bigfoot references, bought each other novelty Sasquatch keychains. But underneath the jokes, there was unease. Nobody wanted to admit they took it seriously, but nobody wanted to work late alone either. I'd heard things myself. Whistles that seemed to come from multiple directions at once. The sound of wood knocking against wood, rhythmic and deliberate, echoing through the mill yard. Once, I'd seen something on the perimeter cameras, just for a few seconds before it moved out of frame. A shape, tall and broad, moving along the fence line. I'd written it up as an animal, maybe an elk, but I knew the proportions were wrong. I knew what elk looked like. That wasn't an elk. The night it happened was February 9th, a Friday. I remember because I'd been looking forward to the weekend. 2 days off, no alarm clock, sleeping in my own bed instead of catching a few hours in the security office between rounds. The weather had been cold and wet for days. Freezing rain that made everything slick and miserable. The kind of weather that keeps people indoors and makes the forest feel even more oppressive. My shift started at 11 p.m. I relieved the evening guard, a guy named Tommy who was always in a hurry to leave. He briefed me quickly. Nothing unusual during his shift. All equipment accounted for. No issues with the fence. He was gone within 5 minutes, his truck taillights disappearing down the access road into the darkness. The maintenance tech that night was supposed to be Dale, a veteran who'd been with the mill for 15 years. But Dale had called in sick at the last minute. The replacement was someone I'd never met. A new hire named Chris Brennan. He was young, maybe 24, and seemed nervous about the assignment. I remember thinking he probably hadn't worked many night shifts. Most people have an adjustment period. The darkness, the isolation, the sounds of the forest at night. It takes getting used to. I showed Chris where everything was. The maintenance shop, the electrical room, the locations of the shut-off valves and breaker boxes. He had a radio clipped to his belt, same frequency as mine. Standard protocol. We were supposed to check in with each other every 30 minutes. If something went wrong, if there was an injury or an emergency, the radio was our lifeline. Cell service at the mill was spotty at best. The radios were reliable. Chris started his work around midnight. Routine maintenance on one of the conveyor systems. I began my first rounds. The mill at night had a particular quality to it. All that machinery sitting silent and still, waiting for Monday morning when they'd roar back to life. The air smelled like sawdust and diesel fuel. My flashlight beam cutting through the fog created these strange halos of light. Everything felt suspended, frozen. The first 3 rounds were uneventful. I checked the gates, walked the fence line, verified all the equipment sheds were locked. Each time I passed the maintenance shop, I could see Chris working under the hood of a conveyor motor, tools spread around him. He waved once. I waved back. At 1:30 a.m., his voice crackled over the radio. "Hey Marcus, everything good on your end?" "All quiet," I responded. "How's the repair going?" "Almost done. Probably another 20 minutes." This bearing was more worn than I expected. "Copy that. I'm heading back to the office. Radio if you need anything." I made it back to the security office and poured myself coffee from the thermos I'd brought. The cameras showed the usual views. Empty parking lot, dark log yards, the perimeter fence stretching into shadow. Nothing moving. I sat down and tried to focus on the radio show, but I couldn't shake a feeling that had been building all night. That sensation of being watched, of eyes on you from somewhere you can't see. At 2:15 a.m., the radio crackled. Chris's voice, but different. Quieter. Tense. "Marcus, you there?" "Yeah, go ahead." Are you anywhere near the log yard?" I checked the cameras. The log yard was empty. Just stacks of raw timber waiting to be processed. "No, I'm in the office." "Why?" There was a pause. Static. Then, I keep hearing something. Out past the fence. Like footsteps. Heavy ones. Circling around. My stomach tightened. Could be a deer. They come through sometimes. "No." His voice was firm. "This is bigger. And it's not moving like a deer. I don't know. It feels like it's pacing. Like it's watching the mill." I pulled up the camera feeds, cycling through each one. Nothing visible. But the cameras only covered so much. The forest beyond the fence was a wall of darkness. "I'm not seeing anything on the monitors," I said. "Are you still in the maintenance shop?" "Yeah. I finished the repair. I was about to head back when I heard it. Should I come back to the security office?" I thought about it. 2 people in the office meant nobody monitoring the property. But the unease in his voice was real. I'd heard it before in new workers who weren't used to the night shift sounds. "Give it a few minutes," I said. "If you hear it again, radio me and I'll come check it out with you. Could just be the wind or equipment settling." "Okay. Yeah. Probably nothing. Sorry. Don't apologize. Better to report it. Stay alert." I watched the cameras more carefully after that, scanning the edges of the floodlight pools, looking for movement. The fog had gotten thicker. It drifted across the yard in slow waves, obscuring and revealing. Minutes passed. 5. 10. The radio stayed quiet. At 2:35, it crackled again. Chris's voice, but now it was barely a whisper. "Marcus. It's at the fence." "What is?" "I don't know. It's huge. It's just standing there, looking in." My heart rate kicked up. "Where are you?" Still in the shop. I can see it through the window. It's maybe 40 feet away, right at the fence line near the equipment shed. I pulled up the camera that covered that area. The angle wasn't perfect, but I could see the fence. I could see the equipment shed. I couldn't see anything else. Just fog and darkness. I'm not getting it on camera. Are you sure? I'm sure. His voice had an edge now. Fear cutting through. It's looking right at me. It knows I'm here. Okay. Stay calm. Stay inside. I'm coming to you. I grabbed my flashlight and the radio. The walk from the security office to the maintenance shop was about 200 yards. Under normal circumstances, maybe a 3-minute walk. That night, it felt like miles. The fog was so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The floodlights created these blurred circles of illumination that barely penetrated the murk. Every shadow looked like it could be something. Every sound amplified. I reached the maintenance shop and knocked. Chris opened the door immediately, his face pale. Where? I asked. He pointed toward the fence. I looked. Saw nothing but fog and trees beyond the chain link. We stood there for a full minute, both of us staring into the darkness. Whatever he'd seen was gone, or hiding. I swear it was there, he said. I'm not making this up. I believe you. Let's get back to the office. We can monitor everything from there. We started walking back together. That's when we heard it. The sound that would change everything. A whistle. Long and low, rising at the end into something that was almost a question. It came from a forest, from somewhere deep in the trees. And then it was answered. Another whistle from a different direction. Then another. 3 distinct sources surrounding the mill. Chris stopped walking. What the hell is that? I didn't answer because I didn't know. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't anything I'd ever heard before. The whistles continued back and forth like a conversation. And underneath them, I could hear something else. Footsteps. Multiple sets, moving through the underbrush parallel to the fence. Move, I said. Back to the office. Now. We walked faster. Not quite running, but close. The whistling followed us. Always just beyond the fence, keeping pace. When we reached the office and locked the door behind us, we were both breathing hard. Call the police, Chris said. And tell them what? That we heard whistles? They won't come out here for that. Then call the mill manager. Someone. I picked up the desk phone. Dead. The line was out. I tried my cell. No signal. Chris tried his. Same result. The radios still work, I said. We can call for help on the emergency frequency. But before I could switch channels, the radio on my belt crackled to life. Not Chris's voice. Not mine. Something else. Static at first, and then underneath it, sounds. Breathing. Heavy and rhythmic. And then, terrifyingly, an attempt at speech. The voice was deep. Impossibly deep. Each word seemed to take enormous effort, like someone trying to speak with a mouth and throat not designed for language. Leave. Here, leave. Chris's face went white. Did that just... The radio crackled again. More words. Clearer this time, but still wrong. Still distorted. Not safe, they coming. I stared at the radio like it was a live snake. This wasn't possible. Radios don't work like this. You need a transmitter. You need someone with a radio on the same frequency, deliberately pressing the button and speaking. This was something else. Who is this? I managed to say into my own radio. Silence. Then, go now before. The transmission cut off. For 30 seconds, nothing. We sat there, frozen, listening to our own breathing and the hum of the office heater. Then every light in the mill went out. All of them. The floodlights, the office lights, the camera monitors. Everything. We were plunged into absolute darkness. Chris made a sound that was almost a sob. I fumbled for my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam seemed pathetically small against the darkness pressing in from all sides. Through the office window, I could see nothing. Just black. The breaker box, I said. It's in the main building. Something must have tripped. I'm not going out there. We can't stay here blind. If something's wrong, we need to see it. Before he could respond, Something hit the office wall. Hard. The entire structure shook. Chris scrambled backward, knocking over his chair. Another impact. This time on the opposite wall. Then the roof. Something was walking on the roof. Something heavy enough that we could hear the metal groaning under its weight. The footsteps moved from one end to the other, directly above our heads. Slow. Deliberate. Then they stopped. Right over where we were standing. I pointed my flashlight at the ceiling. The beam showed nothing but corrugated metal and support beams. But we could feel it. The weight pressing down. The presence of something massive just inches away. The radio crackled. That voice again. Closer now. More urgent. Last warning they not stop. I pause here because I need you to do something. I need you to comment below right now. Tell me what you think was on that roof. Tell me what you think they meant. Was this thing warning us about others of its kind? Or was it warning us about something worse? Comment, please. Because I need to know other people are hearing what I'm saying. The thing on the roof moved again. The footsteps headed toward the edge of the building. Then silence. We waited, flashlight pointed at the door, expecting it to burst open. But nothing happened. After 2 minutes that felt like hours, I crept to the window and looked out. My flashlight beam swept across the parking lot. Empty. I moved it to the fence line. Empty. To the equipment sheds. And then I saw them. Figures. 3 of them. Standing at different points along the fence. Tall. Broad. Motionless. The flashlight beam barely reached them, but I could make out the shapes. They were massive. 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Covered in dark fur. And they were all facing the office. Watching us. Chris, I whispered. Don't panic, but... That's when the radio came to life again. But this time it wasn't words. It was sounds. Grunts and whoops and something that might have been distress calls. Multiple voices overlapping. And underneath it all, I heard something else. Something that didn't belong. A mechanical sound. Rhythmic. Almost like helicopter blades. The figures at the fence moved. All 3 of them, simultaneously, turning away from the office and looking up at the sky. I followed their gaze, but saw nothing through the fog. The mechanical sound grew louder. Closer. The radio descended into pure chaos. So many sounds at once I couldn't separate them. Calls and screams and that voice trying to form words but failing, just producing these desperate, terrified vocalizations. And then lights. Not the mill lights. Different lights. Bright and white and coming from above. They cut through the fog in beams, sweeping across the mill yard. I could see the figures clearly now. They were running, moving with incredible speed toward the tree line. But the lights followed them, tracked them. The helicopter sound was deafening now, directly overhead. The radio went dead. Just static. The lights swept past the office, so bright they hurt to look at. I caught a glimpse of something in the sky. Dark shape. Angular. Definitely a helicopter, but bigger than any I'd seen before. No markings visible. It hovered for maybe 15 seconds, those searchlights probing the forest. Then the lights went out and the sound faded. Within 30 seconds, it was gone. Like it had never been there. The mill lights came back on. All of them, all at once. The sudden brightness was shocking after the darkness. Chris was on the floor, hands over his head. I was pressed against the wall, my flashlight hanging uselessly in my grip. We stayed in that office until sunrise. Neither of us spoke much. What was there to say? When the morning shift arrived at 6 a.m., we told them there'd been a power outage. Didn't mention anything else. The mill manager showed up an hour later, asked if we'd had any problems. I said no. Chris quit that day. Didn't even finish his shift. Just packed his tools and left. I never saw him again. I tried to finish out the week. I lasted 2 more nights. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like it could be something. The radio stayed mostly silent, but twice I heard that static, that underneath layer of sound that felt like someone trying to communicate. On the 3rd night, I heard that voice again. Just one word. Barely audible. Survived. I quit the next morning. Told them it was a family emergency. They didn't fight it. I think they were relieved. Nobody wants jumpy security guards. There were rumors the mill was having financial troubles anyway. 6 weeks later, they announced the closure. Said it was market forces. Said it was more economical to consolidate operations elsewhere. But I heard things. Workers who'd been there longer than me talking about incidents. Equipment vandalized. Supplies gone missing. And always those sounds in the forest at night. I've tried to research what happened. Try to find out if anyone else has experienced something similar. There are stories scattered across forums and obscure websites. Mill workers, loggers, people who work in remote industrial sites. They report similar things. Creatures that seem curious about human operations. Sounds that mimic machinery or voices. And sometimes interventions. Helicopters showing up when these creatures are spotted. Lights in the sky. Government vehicles parked on access roads. I think whatever those things were in the mill that night, they were trying to warn us. That voice on the radio wasn't threatening. It was desperate, urgent. They're coming. Not safe. Leave. Like it knew something we didn't. Like it had seen this before. And then that helicopter showed up and they ran. Fled into the forest, like they were being hunted. Because maybe they were. The more I've learned, the more questions I have. Why would the government be tracking these creatures? What do they know that we don't? And if these things are intelligent enough to use our radios, intelligent enough to try to communicate, why are they hiding? What are they afraid of? I still have the radio. The one from that night. I kept it when I turned in my equipment, told them it was broken. Sometimes, late at night, I turn it on. I don't know what I'm hoping for. Maybe another message. Maybe confirmation that I didn't imagine it. Mostly, there's just static. But once, about a month ago, I heard something. In the static. Words. Broken and distant, but definitely words. They still hunting US. That's when I knew I had to tell this story. Someone needs to know what's happening out there. In the forests, in the remote places where humans and something else intersect. These creatures exist. They're intelligent. They're scared. And someone is tracking them. The sawmill is gone now. The buildings have been torn down. The land sold off. But the forest is still there. Those creatures are still there. And whatever was in that helicopter is probably still out there too, doing whatever it does in the dark when no one's watching. If you've made it this far, if you've heard this story, please do something for me. Hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and comment below with your own experiences. Have you worked night shifts in remote locations? Have you heard things you couldn't explain? Have you seen lights in the sky where there shouldn't be any? I need to know this isn't just me. I need to know other people have seen what I've seen, heard what I've heard. Because if it's just me, then maybe I did imagine it. Maybe isolation and darkness and fear created something that wasn't real. But if others have experienced it too, if there's a pattern, then maybe we can start to understand what's really happening. I can't work nights anymore. Can't handle the darkness, the isolation, the sounds that might not be wind or animals. I jump careers completely. Office work now. Day shift, surrounded by people and fluorescent lights, and the mundane safety of corporate life. I sleep with lights on, white noise machines to cover the sounds of the night. But I still hear that radio sometimes. In my dreams, that voice struggling to form human words, trying so hard to warn me about something I still don't fully understand. Leave here. Not safe. They coming. I left. But what about the ones who can't leave? What about the creatures in the forest who live with this threat constantly? Who hide from helicopters and lights in the sky? Who try to communicate with us when they're desperate enough? When the danger is close enough that even revealing themselves is worth the risk? That last radio call still terrifies me. Not because of what it said, but because of what it implied. That these creatures aren't a threat. That they're running from something else. That they tried to warn us. And we didn't listen. We never listen. The sawmill is closed. Chris disappeared. Moved away, I heard. Changed his number. He doesn't want to be found. I don't blame him. Some experiences mark you. change you. Make it impossible to see the world the same way you did before. That night marked both of us. Showed us something that shouldn't exist. Showed us that the government knows about it. Showed us that there are hunts happening in our forests that have nothing to do with game animals, and everything to do with something far stranger. I'm telling this story because someone has to. Because silence protects whoever is behind those helicopters. Whoever is hunting these creatures. Because maybe, just maybe, if enough people know, if enough people demand answers, we might finally learn the truth about what shares this planet with us. Subscribe. Comment. Share this story if you're brave enough. And if you ever work a night shift in a remote location, if you hear whistles in the darkness or footsteps near the fence, if your radio crackles with a voice that shouldn't exist, listen to it. Whatever it's trying to tell you might save your life. Because that voice on the radio was right. They were coming. And we barely got out before they arrived.